All right, well, let's move to the other side of the ball. Um, we'll go generic first. Overall defense. Talk to me about it. This obviously was the shining star of the game. Talk to me about what you saw and how you thought they played overall.
Yeah, I thought first of all, I thought the game was called brilliantly. I think the defense did exactly what the Eagles did last week. Right? You look at what the Eagles did to the Falcons, and that game was rather close. Right before the end of the first half, it was 7-6. The Falcons multiple times put the Eagles back against the wall, and every time they got within the 10, the Eagles came through. And if you look at the way the defense played, Fred Warner came through big in some huge spots when they had their back up against the wall. It just seemed like the big players on this team made big plays at the right moments. They
Right.
they weren't necessarily the guy that you saw flashing play in and play out, but when they needed to play, whether it was Tart or Ward or Warner or whoever, those big name players, Kinlaw, they made plays when you needed those plays to be made. Bosa was another one. It was a perfect symphony of, hey, we need a big play. All pro go make a big play, and that's what we saw all game, and it was fantastic to see. They could have easily mailed it in on the 91-yard pass when they had the Eagles backed up on the 1 yard line. The fact that they gave up 0 points on that was absolutely incredible.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that you have to give credit under Shanahan's tenure is these guys fight,
Yeah.
right? They don't ever give up, and that's one thing that Shanahan has instilled in these guys. Whether they have their third string, everything out there, they're fighting as hard as they can, and they don't give up anything um, easy without fighting for every second of it. There's a couple of things. So there's some. I'm not actually as I think the defense played well, but I also think there's a lot of room for improvement. But there are some things that improved thoroughly. So let's talk about that stuff first. I thought Fred Warner finally showed out. He was non existent in the first game. He made some big plays early on in that game. And his coverage ability, I think, changed what the Eagles were trying to do on certain plays and really got to Jalen Hurd and made him make some decisions that he didn't want to make because he saw, Fred Warner out there. The communication between the safeties and the corners got way better. They gave up a touchdown, Verrett, and I think it was Ward, where Hawkinson ended up getting the touchdown because they did a cross route. And instead of Verrett staying outside, he went inside. And, it ended up like messing up what Ward was supposed to do. Hawkinson ended up walking in for a score. The same type of play was run this time, but Lenore stayed outside. Jimmy Ward, stayed inside and made that great play. That could have been a momentum shifter if it was a completion. And Ward played it perfectly, no pass interference, turned his head around, disrupted the ball, and it was just a incompletion. That all of that was very, very, very great to see because those were our biggest questions: was are we going to be able to tackle? Are the secondary going to hold up? And yes on both of those. This defensive line still hasn't showed me that they're going to be as dominant as we expected them to be. Right? Last week we got 3 sacks. This week we got 2 sacks. Clearly, Jalen Hurts is a different beast. He's mobile, so to get him down is a little bit harder. But I don't know. Did you feel like the defensive line dominated this game?
No, but also I didn't expect him to. After watching the Eagles last week, I knew what it was. Jalen Hurts last week had, I think, 35 attempts. 15 were at or behind the line of scrimmage. Another 7 were between 1 and 5 yards down the field. And most of those, actually, every single one of them was outside of the hashes. He didn't even or attempt a pass in between the hashes all game last week. That told me that they were going to have a quick hit offense. And that worked perfect against the 49ers, is why I thought it would be a tight game, because I felt like the 49ers would struggle. The strength is supposed to be the defensive line. The defensive line I knew would not be able to get after the quarterback at a high rate because they just get rid of the ball way too quickly and they nullify that defensive line. So, no, I don't think they were dominant, but I do think that they played well when they needed to play well in spots. And I think that run defense was really where they showed up early on. And that was enough for them to ultimately win that game. But as far as a pass rush, the things that we look for in sacks, no, they didn't look dominant. But I think that was more because of the way that the Eagles play more than it is because the 49ers defensive line is not a good defensive line.
Green Eye Irvin says, y'all expect D-line to get 10 sacks a game. That's not the case at all. No. Green Eye or Irvin. I really just look, I think that the defensive line is supposed to do what the defensive line is supposed to do. With the mobile quarterback, you're supposed to keep your gap integrity and not let him break containment. And I think they let him do that too much. If they kept him in the pocket, I think they do get a few more sacks. They couldn't keep him in the pocket, which is what the biggest Achilles heel for the 49ers defense has been. And Jalen Hurts ate us up when it came to scrambling, when the defense pretty much shut down all of his options, and he was able to go get big yardage with his feet. I think that the defensive line needs to get better, and I expect, one name I didn't hear at all this game was Samson Ebukam, and I expected to hear his name a lot because we brought him in just to help us out with these mobile quarterbacks, and unfortunately, gap integrity wasn't there. He was still able to break containment, and yeah, I expect this defensive line to be able to get about 5 sacks a game, no matter who the quarterback is, just based off of the overall talent and what they're able to do. And we haven't hit 5 yet. The first quarter in Detroit, it was against Goff. Goff isn't a mobile quarterback. We weren't able to get him down as often as we needed to. But we're waiting for the defensive line to be super dominant. It still hasn't gotten to that point. And, to Green Eye Irvin's point, we don't have to have the same defensive line compared to 2019. Mobile QB bring a different dynamic compared to a pocket QB. It's absolutely correct. Problem is we play against a lot of mobile QBs in our division. And so if we can't contain those guys, we can't take 4 losses in our division and expect to make the playoffs. So we have to figure something out there. Clearly, we still got the victory here, so that's positive. And overall, you can't. I'm being picky about the defense. Overall, I'd still grade them out an A, just because of how many points they were able to save off of the board. Javon Kinlaw with the field goal block, that was huge. I don't know. I don't think any of these coaches are going to be trying to go for it on 4th down in the red zone anymore, because both Detroit and Philly both got shut down. So I expect teams to start kicking field goals against this defense, because the bend don't break definitely is, I guess, the mantra, and they're doing it really, really well and executing it to perfection.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Eagles easily could have had and should have had 10 more points. Mm-hmm. And that they didn't have, and that's the difference in the game right there. The blocked field goal, and then also the no points after the 91-yard gain. That was so clutch.
Right. So one of the biggest question marks going in was the secondary. So we finally got to see what the secondary looks like with Norman and Lenoir. I mean, you were saying it all up and down your tweets, man. Lenoir is that dude, man. I think we got a stud. We got a star, future star. I think future star cornerback for the 49ers for a long time, right? But looking at how the secondary played, and we could bring in the DBs and the safeties. Do you think that the secondary is good enough to go against some of the high power offenses that we're gonna meet, not only in our division but outside the division as well?
Yeah, I mean, the secondary is good enough if the defensive line is better, right? If the defensive line is who we expect this defensive line to be, then yes, the secondary is good enough to complement it. Also, let's not forget that Mosley is still going to come back, and I believe that Mosley is clearly the second best corner on this team. So, yeah, if Lenoir and Mosley are the guys, I think that they can be good enough. Lenoir, I get it. I get he gave up the 91-yard play, and pretty much everybody can call that out. But the rest of the game, he was damn near perfect. I mean, he had a crossing route where Hurts broke containment early in that game, and he was right there to stop that. He had another one where Hurts broke containment, and it ended up being tipped up. It was later in the game, ended up being tipped up, and Sanders caught it and then was hit and dropped the ball. But that was a great play by him. I mean, really all game, he played so damn good. He had the other one. It was the deep play with Lenoir and Smith, and Tart was there, and he came up from behind and hit the ball away. I think Lenoir played fantastic. And this secondary wasn't, I mean, it was tested deep, right? But it wasn't tested deep in a sense that it's going to be tested by the likes of maybe Green Bay, Seattle, and Arizona the next few weeks, right? It was just, there was a couple deep shots taken, but overall, I thought the secondary this game, their job was to funnel any of the outside plays back into the linebackers and allow them to make plays and just hold containment on the edges as the passing game tries to hit those outside routes. And I think they did a fantastic job of that. But yes, long story or long answer, but yes, the secondary is good enough.
Yeah, and I mean, Norman unfortunately had his first two, throws that went his way are pass interference. One of
I
them
thought
was a
those were
little
ticky
bit,
tack too, man.
yeah, one of them was definitely a little bit ticky tack. One of them, he definitely, held. I mean, at least maybe affected his ability to turn or whatnot. But yeah, I mean, after those two plays, you didn't really hear Josh Norman's name, which is a good thing. For some reason, they kept trying to go at Lenoir, even though he was, not basically being, pretty steadfast there, other than the one deep play that he got beat for. But the thing that really impresses me about Lenoir is he's not necessarily this overly athletic corner, but his positioning is phenomenal. The way that he used that sideline against Devontae, like he's using all of his tools. Seems like a very cerebral player. And we had a cornerback that was really cerebral on our team that, this secondary has missed. And, Richard Sherman. And it seems like Lenoir is that same type of cerebral type player. And I think that's going to be key for us, man. I think if, obviously Verrett's out, but when Mosley comes in, I think we're still too deep with our corners. And, if Verrett was here, man, we'd be 3 deep. And that would be a really, really good situation to be in. But I think next week will be a good test. Obviously, Davante Adams is a much better receiver than any of the receivers that they have faced up until this point. However, hopefully Mosley comes back, and then all of a sudden this defense is a totally different animal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And time's going to tell. Like I said, with much better receivers coming up on the docket, these guys are going to get tested a lot more than they did this week. But Lenoir is one I'm not worried about. Yes, he's going to give up plays. Every corner does. He's still a rookie, a 5th-round pick at that. But Lenoir, to me, looks like he has all the skill sets, all the tools. He was a player I was extremely excited about. You can check the Twitter timeline as soon as they drafted him. I reacted like they just drafted Trey Lance. I was that excited about it. So I know how good of a player he is. I watched him a lot at Oregon. He's a very, very good player. And I think more often than not, he's going to make the right play. And I'm very happy he's on this 49ers team, because right now, if Ambry Thomas was the one that they had to rely on, they would be in a lot of trouble. So I'm glad that he's not.
Yeah, whoever drafts our 5th round and below draft picks needs a raise, because it seems like those guys are really carrying the team right now.
Well, and I'll say this too. I mean, I've got to imagine that some of those later guys are the ones that the scouts have autonomy to pick, right? Those are the ones that they've scouted all year. I feel like early in the draft, that's when a Shanahan falls in love with someone. He's like, I got to have this guy, go get him. That hasn't worked clearly, because they do not hit very often in those first 3 rounds. So whoever's making those late picks, let them make the early picks, please.
Right. I agree, man. I agree.